Good evening and welcome to this Backstage episode that, as you can see, has many protagonists. Many will be on the stage, but there are also other objects under the spotlight. It is a pleasure to see you finally here in person. It is the third conference in person, and to us it's very important to get back to have contact with our audience. Today's topic is the Disco Volante, the flying saucer. It's one of the most photographed cars of the museum, one of the most talked about cars of the museum, and people find inspiration even today in terms of style in this car. Well, it is an iconic car, and it was worth to devote an episode to it because this year it's its anniversary, but also because sometimes to talk about the backstage is always a nice experience. The Disco Volante, if we have a step backwards, was born in a very strange period for Alfa Romeo. In 1951, Alfa Romeo just won for the second time the Formula One World Championship. In those days, it was launching the 1900, the car that was starting the transformation of Alfa in the real automobile industry. But above all, it also marks a moment when Alfa Romeo still has to decide whether to continue with an official sports activity or to really do what they announced at the end of 1951, that is to withdraw from competition. We know that the Alfettas, apart from reaching the end of the revolution, were put aside due to the change in terms and conditions in 1952. And Alfa Romeo was thinking about the Type 160 for the new 1954 Formula with 2.5 liters. But we also know that in the second half of the 30s, the sports races like Le Miglia and other races were the top priority for Alfa Romeo. So Alfa, in that moment of confusion, started to bring about several objects of cars that are either sports car or can become sports car. We have that project of the Disco Volante, we will talk about today, but we also have the project of the 633,000 that will become 63000 cm, which is confused with the Disco Volante, but it has a very different chassis, different brakes, 3 liters, 6 cylinders engine designed from scratch. So it is a car that, apart from almost winning 1953 Mille Miglia edition, looks ahead into the future. On the other side, we have instead another variation, which is the 2000 Sports and 1900 Spider that share the same mechanics with the 1900, but have a very simpler chassis, more similar to the Series 1, even though they have the Dion bridge compared to the flying saucer. The main differences are in the mechanic components, and the Disco Volante, from this point of view, is the one which will have the most extreme settings. In 1952, it will bring to debut the completely aluminum engine. You see it in the top part of the image, so you see that it is in light alloy. The 1900, even the Series 1, should have been born with a light alloy engine, but then in order to solve problems of vibration and reliance at the last moment, it was decided for that generation to build a cast iron engine, while the Disco Volante, that had no problems or noise, being a competition car, used and mounted an aluminium engine, which was more modern compared to the one which had almost the same power of the 2000 sports car, the one below, that still had a part in cast iron. In those moments, other projects were developed, like for example the 750 competition, which is sort of the product of a collaboration with Carlo Abarth, which saw the Abarth 1000 and then 750 competition see the light. So it was a period which was full of activity, but apart from a few appearances on the track and a lot of noise from the point of view of communication, would not give way to new generations of cars. The Alfa Romeo would really make a step backwards, focusing all the attention on the Giulietta, the series production, the industrial renaissance of the company, and all these cars would only remain prototypes. The Disco Volante is one of the most loved ones and one of the more sensational. So it was the beginning of the 50s. On the other side of the oceans, there were cars with any kind of element recalling the sea, the space, the sky, and also in Europe, these inspirations were accepted. So the Disco Volante was a car like this one, and all the major newspapers and magazines went crazy for what was the new Alfa Romeo, with this very aggressive name, which should have, according to the public opinion, had to bring back again the winnings of the Alfa Romeo in the sports competitions before the war. So, in the press review, there were titles in many magazines. This is the Pirelli magazine, with some images in color, but with an international coverage, which recalls the attention of Le Mans, the Mille Miglia, the possibility of having again a car to sell to the gentleman drivers who wanted to take part in these competitions. There were magazines in Italian, English, French, German. I decided not to cut out the images, but to leave also the back of the pages, because one of the characteristics of the press releases on Updates is that they were made of recycled paper. So the press clippings, which are just articles cut and printed, are printed on technical documents, letters, which sometimes go back to the Second World War period. In this case, you see letters, contracts, technical drawings. So all the recycled paper was used at the time for the press reviews. The consequence of what this expectation gave to the Disco Volante is that in Alfa Romeo, gentleman driver, pilots, etc., started to ask to buy this car. Some of them wanted to participate in a Mille Miglia, but Alfa Romeo, starting from the beginning, gave lukewarm answers and then started to reject these requests. Alfa Romeo, and especially Mr. Quaroni, refused all these offers, arriving through a letter, but also through officials, managers of Alfa Romeo, saying that it was not for sale, only a few prototypes were assembled, and this is true, and then if some change would appear, they would have contacted them. So, of these rejection letters, we have a lot. And this testifies and witnesses how the ambitious project of the Disco Volante, in effect, was abandoned, at least from a commercial point of view, almost immediately. Another interesting documentation is about a dispute on the name. So, there is a folder of litigation with Carrozzeria Colli for the name. We know that at the same period that car repair was a partner of Alfa Romeo, because the 63000 CM were confused sometimes with the Disco Volante by the newspapers and magazines, and they were built by Carrozzeria Colli. Carrozzeria Colli sends a letter to Alfa Romeo saying that the Disco Volante name was not used by them because some magazines launched the news of a car on a Panhard base called Flying Saucer. So the first approach is quite shy, saying we have nothing to do with this name, we do not want to overlap with Alfa Romeo, we have a relationship, a collaboration with them underway, and we would never want to have problems. And immediately Carrozzeria Colli has this letter published on the magazines and sends a message proving that they didn't use the name. But immediately after, there is a greater problem. Carrozzeria Colli says, actually, the flying saucer was not done by chance, but there were some of our clients, and among these also Costa di Castelbarco, which was a famous pilot, who wanted a Panhard-based car, very light, small, recalling the shapes of the Disco Volante that, as we've just seen, created sensation in the automobile world. And the result was that in order not to say no to these clients, they started the construction of such a car. But Alfa Romeo, which usually has always been very soft towards these situations, we told a few months ago, but the case when the Triumph built the Dolomite with a project very similar to the 8C 2003, but Alfa Romeo didn't say a lot. But in this case, Alfa issues a very straightforward reply saying, we regret the situation for your customers, but we do not want authorize the Carrozzeria Colli to produce cars too similar to our Disco Volante. So we have already deposited the patents protecting the name, the project, and also the shape of the chassis. And that was quite innovative for the time. But if we look at the pictures that go together with the folder, we see that the flying saucer of Carrozzeria Colli and the Disco Volante we have here today were quite similar. So it was not only an inspiration, but the inspiration was very, very important. It was major. And also the magazines noticed this. And then the matter of the name, again for the second time, is taken into account. But then the MV, a motorbike, presented a bike in several versions called Disco Volante. In this case, there are a series of notes from the General Directorate saying that the Disco Volante name were patented, but that MV could nonetheless call a motorbike Disco Volante. But they went to the dealer of MV and they asked a quote estimate. So that note you see is a real quote estimate done on the back of a business car of a MV salesperson in Milan. So the career and the disputes on the name of the Disco Volante would finish with this episode. Only 5 prototypes were built. We will talk about 5, well, the 4 that are still here today. But you can see that inside this room there is a more modern object. So I would like to invite Salvatore Stranci, the CEO of Touring Superleggera, to come here, tell us something about this car. Salvatore, please come on stage with me. Please take a seat. Well, I thank everyone for coming here to participate to this beautiful event. I would like to thank the museum, which gave me this great opportunity. Of course, the first thing to say is that these cars are amazing. The aesthetics is fantastic. And also that one that we are celebrating, the C52, I must say that for the time it had a fantastic design. It was a pioneer. It's a renowned project that remain in the memory of everyone, in the history, and also in the fantasies of all the car lovers. I would like to thank, well, I start immediately with the acknowledgements. I apologize, but I want to thank the Bianchi Anderloni family who conveyed something very important to our company. Today, I wouldn't like to talk about the product because the product speaks by itself. It is a fantastic car that is an inspiration to this beautiful car. It has an exceptional engine. The donor car is an 8C competition. So these two brands are exceptional for the Italian market and for the international market. But I really want to talk about something that I learned, which is passion. What I was taught by the Bianchi Anderloni family over the years, as with the registry, which kept all the contacts with the customers, taught us, giving all the possible information, conveying, as I said, this passion to everyone and tried to consolidate our company. But this is incredible. So passion is the first word I would like to underline. Passion, which is passed on and continues to be present in all the persons working for our company. Incredible passion for the brand, for the product, for the capacity of bringing together styles and materials, even the most peculiar ones. And then another word that comes to my mind is, and again, I must say that this was inherited by the family, is belonging. Well, each one of us feels a sense of belonging. Even the workers working on our products, and you will see later on when we will open the hood of this car, you will see something very important. Every person who worked on this car and who really spent 5,000 man-hours to produce this car signed a plate inside the hood which says, I took part in the construction of this car. So belonging. Belonging is something fantastic. It is something that is almost part of our company. I say our company because it is our company, it is our brand, it is the brand of each one of you, because if you are here today, it is because you love this specific brand. Today we are celebrating the C52, which is a fantastic, beautiful car. But Carrozzeria Touring with Alfa Romeo did incredible things, and we could not describe them in a full day. They did wonders. Belonging is a word which is part of each and every one of us, is part of the registry, of the family, and of the company. Each person is honored, but really honored, to be part of this family. And I think that these are the two most important things we learned and inherited from them. Thank you. Just a technical element to describe the car, because of course, this is the more modern car compared to these beautiful creations. Even though the car we celebrate is this one, it is this one, this is an incredible car anyway, because first of all, it is sort of a marriage after 70 years, once again, between Alfa Romeo and Touring Superleggera. So this car is a car that our design studio designed impeccably in every single detail, but we should not forget that below it there's an 8C competition. So if you have in your garage something like that, there's 18 people, 18 lucky persons who had the honor and the luck of owning such a car, 18 people in the world who I'm sure I know all of them one by one. They have in their garage an 8C competition. They bought the 8C to transform it in the Disco Volante, and the other one have it in the garage. So two fantastic cars. And I'm done with this. Thank you. Here you can see the images of the presentation of the new Disco Volante Spider and Coupe. And we also have an image of Villa d'Este where the Spider won an award. So this is a beautiful image, I must say. Well, those are all the people who took part in the project, and I must say that winning this competition made us really enthusiastic. Each of us in the organization could not believe this almost, but I must say that the car is beautiful, fantastic, it's very beautiful, and the audience answered in a very positive way. So if we continue, and I thank again Salvatore for his participation, we talked about 5 cars produced, 4 of which survived, while the 5th disappeared very early from the registry in the history of this automobile. A coupe and a Spider with the 2 liters engine are part of the Alfa Romeo Museum collection. One narrow sides, we'll talk about this later on, is exposed at the Mulhouse at the Cité dell'Automobile in the Schunck collection. And another car, with 3 liters engine, was owned by Alfa Romeo and donated it to another important museum in Italy, the Turin Museum Automobile. So Davide Lorenzone, the curator, he joins us on stage to tell us something about this car. Well, but before leaving the floor to Davide, I would like to give the floor to his boss, Mariella Megozzi, the director of the museum. Dear Backstage friends, I'm at the National Museum of Automobile in Turin. I would like to thank Lorenzo Ardizio, the director of Alfa Romeo Museum, who asked us to participate to this day when we are talking about one of the most iconic cars of its history, the Disco Volante. I'm here next to the Disco Volante, the prototype of Mauto collection, prototype from 1952. I must say that it's one of the most admired cars in this museum. It has just been lent to Brussels to Auto World for the Supercar Story exhibition, where I was told had an incredible success. It is a car which was given to Mauto, as most of the cars of our collection, by Alfa Romeo, specifically to be exposed to tell the story of automobile for future generations. So we are very happy to have here this prototype. I'm not saying a lot because Davide Lorenzone is there with you. He is an engineer and he will tell you the technical characteristics, but I must say that we are here in a room dedicated to the evolution of the style of cars. We have Italian cars, the Italian style, which gave a lot to the world automobile industry. So we have a Touring Superleggera chassis, which is wonderful, with these 2 curves, I would say, which are incredibly recognizable. A unique car, which tells very well the evolution of style next to the other cars exposed in this car, the Ferraris, Maseratis, Alfa Romeos. So it is in good company. This room anticipates the room dedicated to temporary exhibitions, and I take the chance here to remind you that we just inaugurated Motus, an incredible exhibition here at the museum. Will be here until September 25th, that tells about the prehistory of the automobile, from the Sumerian wheel to the first bands in 1886. It is an incredible journey through millennials and continents to tell the story of the inventions that led to the creation of moving vehicles or automobiles. So I wait you here at the museum. I cannot be there, unfortunately, with you, but there's so many events in this season, so please enjoy your day, and I'm waiting for you here. Davide, tell us something about the Disco Volante you have in Turin, which is very different, even though it looks like it is identical to the one we have in Arese. Well, yes, it's very similar, but if we would compare them side by side, they are very different. This is very sportier, lower, with a more aggressive line compared to ours, which has a bigger engine. It is a 6C3000, and it is not as low as this one. Even though the shape is very similar, it is a completely different car, especially in terms of mechanics. As I said, the engine is bigger. It was donated to our museum by Alfa Romeo. Alfa Romeo is linked to our museum since the beginning because Santo Carlo Biscaretti, who had incredible and excellent relationships with all the car dealers and car brands, he was able to receive several cars, and Alfa Romeo is one of the brands which wanted to donate the best cars they produced to the museum in order for them to be kept in history. The museum arrives at the museum in 1956, and the top picture you see the car arriving in the museum in 61 when the new museum was inaugurated. Where it is today, it was moved, so we see that in the other picture. So in these pictures you can see already the differences. The first one is the front. The front is similar but wider compared to the one that we have here. So they're very similar, but at the same time they're different. The mechanics is bigger compared to the one we have here. It is complete, 100% complete, because Alfa Romeo, when they donate cars, they want to donate them complete in order to be remembered for generations. So if one wanted to do a study, but in our museum we have all original cars except for a few missing parts. So both the paint and the mechanics are the original ones. Today the car is in excellent conditions. It is preserved in the best possible way. We're trying to conduct studies to check the type of paint that was used in those years. So next year we will try and have a scientific analysis to understand the composition that was used in those years to paint the cars, and also assess the types of materials used for the chassis of the car. So what we do today in our restoration department is try to keep at their best the cars and their characteristics to pass them down to future generations. Thank you, Davide. But now I would like to invite another guest. I would say the real protagonist of this story, Giovanni Bianchi Anderloni, who's the nephew of the founder of Carrozzeria Touring, which at the time was not Superleggera yet, and who will tell us the story of the Disco Volante firsthand. Please take a seat. Thank you. Thank you very much. I particularly thank the speakers before me, Mr. Stranci, for the nice words on my family. That makes me shy because I cannot be compared to my father and my grandfather, but it was a nice thing you said. Thank you. Well, the Disco Volante. It was born with an idea that you can see. the paper of the official patent from Gioacchino Colombo and Touring, and my father specifically, to patent a particular car with very aerodynamics peculiarities and very peculiar shapes, as it is shown in the patent. So you see, at the top, you see the sides. It was called Disco Volante or Flying Saucer. So I have not cleared the origin of the problem with Carrozzeria Colli and the name, but anyway, we can continue with the next slide. Well, Disco Volante, as all the other touring cars, since 1936-37 onwards, they had a specific tubular chassis with thin steel tubes where the bodywork was riveted. So the Superleggera patented by our grandfather, because there's my brother here also, in 1936. Here we can see a detail of the old plant in Via de Breme of the Carrozzeria Touring. The man with the tie is our father, who's passing in front of the tubular chassis of the Disco Volante. Here you see the front of the car with the aluminium parts fixed to the frame of steel tubes. See, the old car shop was not very tidy. You see other elements of other cars. So this is a detail of the Alfa Romeo factory, where the engines were mounted on the two cars. One, I think, is a 2000, and the other one is a 3000. You talked about before. So this is one of the very first pictures, if not the first picture, of a complete car in the yard of the old Carrozzeria Touring in Via de Breme here in Milan. And here is a series of pictures, the pictures which then triggered the journalists in telling during that, after the test of the Disco Volante in Monza. By the way, you see the pilot, Consalvo Sanesi, is a test pilot here. Maybe our friend knows who's the other person. Gioacchino Colombo. Okay, you're right. And here you see that the car is being prepared for the tests. To the right, Consalvo Sanesi, and the other one, I think it's Gioacchino Colombo, and some mechanics working on the engine. Here, Sanesi is sitting in the car. Here we can see other details, other pictures that you can see and compare with the car. So front and back. You see the two little tails of the car. It was a new drawing and new design. There was an aerodynamic study to get to that shape. Other pictures of the car. So Sanesi is going on the track in Monza for the first tests of the car. And then there will be another picture, which is the same printed on the postcard that we will give to everyone later on. I think that this is one of the two Lesmo bends with Salmo Sanesi during the test. So these tests were all made with the 3 liters. With the 3 or 2? No, no, with the 3 liters. You can see it from the fact that it has a single windshield, and also you see below the side exhaust, while the other one, the one with the slender mechanics, had different exhaust. Oh, I learned something today. Thank you. I didn't know that, honestly. Thank you, Lorenzo. So that was another picture that I like a lot because there's a dedication of Consalvo Sanesi to my father here. Here we see a Disco Volante, narrow sides, I don't know why it was there, with a 3000 cm, the one made by Colli. So you see Sanesi on the Disco Volante, the other pilot who is Zanardi. Oh, okay, Zanardi. Sanesi and Zanardi were two of the great test pilots of Alfa Romeo, and the last ones taking part in the Magnificent Seven, the test pilots who gave way to all the Alfa Romeos of the post-war period. So I stand up to better see the screen. Okay, I was saying this picture, two of the main design trends of the time are recapped with the Disco Volante, who had a tubular chassis, a stiff bridge designed by Gioacchino Colombo, and a 6C 3000 cm was a completely different car designed by other people as well, because the 6C 3000 cm was the daughter of the generation of designers, Oretta Sacacuriga with Giuseppe Busa, who designed the engine, and as we know was one of the main supporters of the Didion Bridge, which is mounted on the 3000 cm. So the car which is exposed at the museum is a Spider Merano, because the 6 3000 cm were built by Colli to take part in the Mille Miglia. We know that in 1953 they almost won the race, and Fangio would rank second after having a problem, and a few kilometers from the finish line he was overpassed by Marzotto. The Spider would win the Supercorte Maggiore race in Merano, and after that it was transformed and used to test the Lockheed brakes that are still mounted on the car exposed in the museum. Well, thank you, very interesting. This is a page of the Motor magazine, an English magazine, June 11th, 1952, announcing, as taken for granted, the participation of the car at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in that year. So I wanted to show you this page because those lines in the middle always struck me. It says, which hand or immortal eye can have conceived such a dreadful symmetry? So it's very nice, it's evocative. Here you see the coupe, and I also wanted to show you the Jaguar E, because in a book written by Tito Angelo Anselmi, and my father in 81-82, at one point Tito Anselmi wrote the managers, the director or the owner of Jaguar would need to come to Milan to bring a couple of champagne bottles to the touring technicians, because they took inspiration from the Disco Volante coupe. And you see that especially on the front benders and the front part, there's a lot of inspiration. This is the Turin exhibition. I think it's 53. It was the setting up of the exhibition. Giovanni, do you know what's written on the side, maybe? What? Have you ever read what's written on the side? Yeah, I noticed, but it's Superleggera. So I read Superleggera on top, below, I cannot read. Have you seen something? No, I tried to magnify it, but I couldn't read it. Superleggera is easily readable, but below, I don't know. I could not read it. Maybe there's a system to clean the image of blurred, to clear the blurring of image. It will be the next challenge for our fans, because as you can see on the side of the coupe, there are no plates, no symbols. Yes, it is so true. This is taken from a book written by my father on the Disco Volante. It's like a registry of the cars produced, so with the numbers. See, the first one is the Spider, it is this one. Then another serial number, the Coupe, which is this one. And then the third car was a Disco Volante like that one, but it was then transformed into what we will see later on in a picture, which is the so-called narrow sides for a Swiss pilot, whose name I don't recall now. I'm aging, and memory is not 100%, but he was a pilot. No, there's no name of the pilot, but I can find it somewhere. Anyway, this Swiss pilot. Wait, no. It was bought later on by this Ducre. The original pilot was another one. Was specialized in uphill races and wanted a narrower, swifter car to go in the mountains. And then number 4, the 3000, is in the Turin Museum, and the 5th car, we don't know where it ended. We know it was built, but then it disappeared. Maybe we will find it in the future. Maybe someone has found or will find the Disco Volante. We don't know. Here, the Disco Volante was such a sensation that it was invited to the Museum of Modern Art in New York to be exposed there, to be showcased, and we see a very old plane transformed in a cargo plane, and we see a series of operations, of actions to put the car in the plane. You can see that it was very difficult at the time. Can you lend me a little bit the pointer, please? So there's 2 people easily identifiable. So the man here, so this man is our father, and the other man with a coat is Mr. Bolzoni, who's the business partner of our father. And then Colombo, not Gioacchino Colombo, but another Colombo, was in the car. So as the famous narrow sides, so these are pictures that we were sent from Mulhouse. So the current director of the museum sent us these pictures. As you see, the museum in Mulhouse has a very specific story. It was a private collection, the Schlum collection, which at a certain point, after financial episodes and failures, it was made a state museum, inaugurated in 1986 together with ours. There are many cars in that museum with a great collection, especially of Bugatti, Delage and other French cars, but they also have 2 Alfa Romeo, both made by Touring, so the Disco Volante, the narrow side ones, and AC 2009B with Carrozzeria, with Berlinetta Touring chassis, which is similar to the one we have in the museum in blue color, and the narrow sides is like the one in the Museum of Touring, a snapshot of the times, because it was as the one in Turin was never used, also this narrow sides was preserved as it was when it stopped racing. So the narrow sides are the only Disco Volante which really raced, because as Giovanni anticipated before, and I leave the floor again to him, it was modified after the sports request of a pilot. So the car would change ownership and pilot several times until when it arrived at the deposit of Jean Studer. This character, who had links with the Swiss Alfa Romeo, had dozens of 8C 2009. Almost all the cars, these cars which went on the market, then passed by Studer, which just after the Second World War bought en masse a series of materials, automobiles, spare parts, engines from Alfa Romeo. So when the Second World War was over, they put some material in their warehouses, and they needed to have liquidity and to get rid of what is today an incredible heritage, but at the time was just a pile of used objects that could still be used for races. So after a series of changes of ownership, the narrow sides goes to Jean Studert, who sells it to Fritz Schlumpf, who would put it in his great museum, where it is still exposed in this old incredible spinning mill. Giovanni, these are the pictures of the car today. As you can see, it has a 2 liters. It's very similar to the Spider we have here. But you also brought us pictures of the time. Yes, these are the first pictures of the car in the yard of Carrozzeria Touring in Via de Bremen. I've seen it before, but you see, there's the front of an American car at the back. That was a Hudson, which in those years, it was 53. So it was, well, Hudson was an automobile producer, which then disappeared, and they gave to Touring the indication to build a car, which was shown in Villa d'Este. Well, that car was disassembled, and 23 or 25 cars like that were produced. These are other pictures of the car, always in the yard. As I said, they disassembled a Disco Volante. I don't know up to which point they used pieces and spare parts. The windshield, I think it was used, the headlamps, but for the most part it was rebuilt. This is another detail. So you see, the internal part is very similar to the original Disco Volante. So I wanted to specifically mention here Alfa Romeo as a tribute, because the Touring registry, but not only, shows Alfa Romeo cars in many occasions. That was the first touring rally organized by our friends in Bassano. So the man standing, the one with the jeans and the white shirt, was Mr. Bonfanti, who was an Alfa Romeo manager, if I'm not wrong, who, with the Bassano and Feltre Club, organized this first ever rally of touring automobiles. I think that other man is Mr. Moroni, is a pilot, test pilot. I'm not sure. Maybe someone can help us. So the one driving the Disco Volante, with my father congratulating him. Next to Raw, and Milan's exhibition grounds. This is the monument inaugurated 10 years ago, well, 12 years ago, yes, in 2010, on the occasion of the 100 years of Alfa Romeo. It was chosen by the managers of Alfa Romeo as a monument, as an example, to commemorate the event. You see, and that's the shape of the Disco Volante. And there's a plate, and my name is also present on that plate, because I also contributed to the realization of this monument. That was an initiative of the Italian Registry of Alfa Romeo, and with Bonalumi, and the shape of the Disco Volante was commissioned to the design department. Well, I've seen it. I've seen someone before. Zbigniew Maurer is here with us, and he collaborated with us for another Backstage. So, if I'm not wrong, you were also working at the design department when you realized the part of the monument linked to the Disco Volante, right? Do you want to say something? Yes, now it might look obvious because we are celebrating the Disco Volante. But you can imagine that 100 year of Alfa Romeo was an incredible, it was a huge anniversary. Well, about Alfa actually, but also about Alfa Romeo. Anyway, we were thinking about how to celebrate it in many ways, and one of the ideas was to create a monument of 100 years of Alfa Romeo. And you can imagine the feeling of awkwardness, of how to do it. Maybe someone wanted to use like a sort of a coat of arms, a stylized, but they said no, it's better to have a car, but it's not easy. Which car? And of course it is very difficult because you risk of making happy a couple and angry all the others. The 6C 850 or a Monza, well, were some candidates, but it was not easy. I remember one of these meetings where I was present, and at least that two other people who are here were present in these meetings. Yeah, our friends Alessandra and well, the kid was not here yet, but was in the belly. Anyway, we were sitting in the nice entrance of the Alfa Romeo design department, the Centro Stile, which was like 400 meters distant from here. And we were talking again about the choice of a model, what to present. And at one point, we realized that there were big drawings done by an architecture studio. And then we were moving these big drawings, and we realized by chance that these drawings were put on a table. And on this table, there was a 1:5 model of the Disco Volante, this one, whose picture is also in the book of your father and Mr. Anselmi. So that model was used for the Breda aerodynamic tests, if I'm not wrong. So it was a magic moment because everyone stood silent. We looked at each other in the eyes and we understood this is it. First of all, because it's an incredible shape. It is a unique shape. I would leave aside the Jaguar E-Type because it's something different. This is unique. And another element is that apart from the narrow sides, which lost the strength, I mean the visual strength of this one, there is no private car. There's two museums, both of them in Italy, owning the car. And it was sort of a magic moment because everyone understood without speaking a word that this was the model that could represent 100 years of Alfa Romeo. So that's the story. Thank you. Thank you, Zbigniew. The backstage is also this. So trying to put together as many information and evidence as possible. So these conferences are recorded and they will become part of the Alfa Romeo archive. And the last picture that I wanted to show you is a picture of the Disco Volante. This is the coupe. I didn't know yet that Mr. Stranci would speak and that the car would be shown here, so I wanted to put a picture of this car just to give the idea of continuity of thought. A dozen years ago, many of the members of the registry recall it, even though they're not here, went in Terrazzano di Ro for the presentation of this car, and I said a couple of words. At the time, I was asked my opinion, and I said that out of the modern cars, this looked like the one which gave the best interpretation of a continuity of thought between the old Carrozzeria Touring and the new Carrozzeria Touring, which continued its tradition and heritage. Thank you. It is now to acknowledge the participants, but actually there's a Q&A moment, and then you will have the opportunity, as Salvatore promised, to open the hoods of the cars and see the secrets hiding inside. It was a pleasure having your contributions, Giovanni. I thank you for your experience. So thanks to the registry of Touring Superleggera, we have a tribute signed by Bianchi Anderloni, which is also a collectible. So thanks, Giovanni. Thanks, Salvatore, also for bringing here this car, which is not easy to see. It's impossible. Well, actually, it is possible to see it on the road, but it's also very difficult to see it during events. Davide, thank you. Thank you to Mariella for your contribution. It was a pleasure because we rarely can talk about all the exemplaries, the items of a car, having them here. If there are questions, well, I see a question. I bring you the mic. Thank you. I don't know whether it will be possible, but since we're talking about Touring and Alfa Romeo, well, as a historian, I'm investigating the history of Alfa Romeo. And I found a character who made me curious. The designer of Alfa Romeo, Federico Fermenti, but not much is known about him. He is a person about whom we have very few details, but by designing for Touring, he designed some of the most beautiful cars in history. Well, thank you for what you said. It is very important. Federico Fermenti is one, maybe the best, and the best known of what our grandfather and our father called the visualizers. So Touring, Carrozzeria Touring, was very different from other famous Italian car shops. So they had no external collaborators like Gandini, Michelotti, or Fioravanti, etc. Because the designers had always been first our grandfather and then our father, who unfortunately, I don't have the picture here, but it's a picture which is easily found. So they were at the back of the visualizer and designers, and with them they created a new car. So our father and our grandfather gave the indication saying, correct here, the front longer, the door wider, etc. This detail has to be changed. But they built together with these persons, with these designers, the car, which was then transformed into a colored model, and from that, then there were the drawings at a smaller scale or one-to-one scale. So the big drawings needed for the details. Federico Fermenti arrived in Turin in 1945 or 46, and he was 18. He was a young guy who just finished the art school, or the high school. I don't know the name of the school at the time. Anyway, it was an art school. And it was a school for people who would then go and work for fashion and design, advertisement. And he always worked for Touring, apart from a short period at the end of the 50s, and then he came back. And when Touring closed its doors, he was hired by Fratelli Marazzi, who completed the Lamborghini order, and then he went. Well, my father called him at the design department of Alfa Romeo. He's a very modest man. He doesn't want to show off, as many others of these visualizers. I met them, especially from Formenti, who I met personally. When I was a student at Polytechnics, I went to the Carrozzeria, the new Nova Milanese plant, to practice, to do drawings, mechanical drawings. I used his pencils, and he was an exquisite person. Are there other questions? Yes, Leonardo. Just out of curiosity, there's a picture of Turin. In that picture, well, not the car, not the picture. That car was published on other magazines. So there was a lettering Superleggera Disco Volante Coupe. The picture I showed before, Disco Volante Coupe, Superleggera Disco Volante Coupe. Yes, in yellow, probably. So we know what was written on the side of the car. Thank you for your contribution. Other questions? Well, then now I would like to say something else. For 2023, we will like, in parallel to the Backstages, do a series of conferences dedicated to the car repairs and car builders, because Alfa Romeo worked a lot with these carrozzieri, because Alfa Romeo sold chassis, and also in the post-war period they could take the best from the, I would say, competition creativity that was present with Italian car makers and car repair shops. And we will start with Carrozzeria Touring, which, as we know, signed some of the most representative cars of the history of Alfa Romeo, not only Disco Volante. So we will call it, when you talked about this a few days ago to me, I told you that a few years ago, like 10 years ago, we had a conference for a club of fans. I don't remember the name. Alfa Sport, Club Alfa Sport. And Elvira Ruocco was present, and it was a memorable day. The conference lasted all day long. We will try to have a shorter conference, but I will participate happily. I'm available. Okay, your agenda is blocked. We already blocked your agenda. We don't know the date yet, but it will be beginning of next year. Well, another conference that we would like to organize is on donations that Alfa Romeo did to the different museums, because before we were talking with Davide, Alfa Romeo, when they were donating cars, well, was not donating B-series cars. They were donating maybe the best model. It is true for the Disco Volante. It donated the one with the higher technical evolution. That's a snapshot of the times, and the same is valid for the Alfetta. It is also valid and true for the P2, which was exchanged with the Type B. So it is a pleasure that Alfa Romeo could convey its value through the cars, understanding that museums all over the world could be a way to create what for Alfa Romeo was the culture of the Italian automobiles, its technique, its style, and many other things. I would like to thank all of you. Can I say one last thing? Yes, of course. The International Touring Superleggera Registry, of which I am the honorary president and curator, printed one of the pictures that we've seen before on a postcard that me and my brother signed, and we want to distribute it to all the participants. Thanks again, Giovanni, Davide, Salvatore, for your precious contributions. There will be other occasions to work together with you, and thanks to our audience, especially both here and also online, because you're always numerous and expert. We will see you again in May for the Backstage, and we will talk about the 75 Turbo Evolution IMSA, which won twice the Giro Italia in 88 and 89. Have a nice day, everyone.